Alright, so this is part 2 of ratios and similar figures. So this is more about the ratio part of it. So I want to take a look at some word problems here. I'll first look at simple word problems, and these are easy to do in your head, but let's look at the way in which you're supposed to do them. So that way when we get to the more complex ones, you know how to do them. You have a sort of a structure to do them. So here's a problem. It says, when you visited Canada, you were told that $1 was worth 1.34 Canadian dollars. How much would 200 Canadian cost you in US dollars? So this is like two similar figures. Okay, on the one side you have US dollars, and on the other side you have Canadian dollars. And there are corresponding numbers, sort of like corresponding sides. So for example, $1 corresponds to 1.34 Canadian dollars. How much would 200 Canadian dollars cost you? So 200 on that side, X on this side, because we don't know that. So one of the things that you should learn when you're doing word problems is to make sure that you define what X is. So you can define X like I have done it in a table. It's pretty clear. Under that heading, US dollars is 1 and X. Under Canadian dollars is 1.34 and 200. But another way to do it would have been to say, using let statements, let X be the number of US dollars. US dollars that correspond to 200 Canadian. Okay, so that's another way to do it. But just like in similar figures, now that you have everybody corresponding things lined up, you can set up an equation. So you could say, and if you could recall the similar figure problems, I said I always put the X on top if I can. So I would say X corresponds to 200, and that's equal to 1 and 1.34. Okay, so that's one way to set this up. So X is to 200 as 1 is to 1.34. Okay, and we can now use cross multiplication. So 1.34x is equal to 200, and divide by 1.34, 1.34, x equals 200 divided by 1.34. So let's see, 200 divided by 1.34 works out to be a decimal that goes on forever. So here is one of those cases where actually keeping it in decimal form makes sense, because we're talking dollars here. So in this problem, when I do the division, I get 149, and if I round to 2 decimal places, because it's dollars and cents, $149.25, right? So report your answer. So X would be $149.25, right? So when you're doing a word problem, all these elements, I'm looking for all these elements. And often students will say, well, I got the right answer, but the right answer is simple to do. We needn't have even gone through all of this work to do that. What you're practicing is how to set up that equation, how to go through the problem in a systematic way, and how to solve that equation and come up with the answer. So what am I looking for when I grade a word problem? Number one, I look for the definition of X. Have you explained what X is? Number two, I look for a proper equation, right? So I look for a proper equation. Okay, so don't, people write all kinds of weird equations. It's got to be something that makes sense in the context of the problem. And then number three, I look for the solution process, right? So solution process. And number four, I look to see if you've reported the answer. right there. Okay, so let's go through another example, and we'll make sure we follow those 4 steps, right? And so this is a unit conversion question, very similar to the one above, but useful if again, if there are nurses in this class. So a nurse must administer 220 micrograms of a drug to a patient. The drug is only available in vials that contain 44 micrograms per liter, right? And per milliliter. How many? I think that's a typo there. It probably should be 400 micrograms right there. 440 micrograms. Sorry about that. Make the change in your, if you're taking notes. 440 micrograms per milliliter. How many milliliters should be given? All right. So let's see. So we have micrograms. And milliliters. Milliliters. And so let's start writing corresponding numbers. So 440 micrograms per milliliter. That means per 1 milliliter. Okay, 220 micrograms. We don't know how much, so X. So this is perfectly good. Alternate way of writing this could have been X equals, let X equals milliliters needed. Milliliters needed for 220 micrograms. Okay, so that's important. Second step, let's come up with an appropriate equation. So we could do X divided by 220, corresponding sides, equals to 1 divided by 440. Okay, so that's the equation. And now let's solve this. So 440x is equal to 220 times 1, which is 220. So divide that by 440. X is equal to 220440. Make sure you reduce if at all possible. So this one certainly reduces. You could reduce by 10, takes you there. I know that some of you could do this faster, but I just want to sort of walk you through the process. You don't have to get the greatest thing to reduce by. You can sort of work your way there. You could look at this and say, well, they're both even numbers, so I can reduce by 2, so that's going to give me 11 there and 4. Did I do that right? 11, no, 11 and 22, excuse me. 11 and 22. Let me erase that. Write it as 22. And if you stare at that long enough, you'll see that 11, you can reduce this by 11. 11 goes into 11 one time. 11 goes into 22 two times, so 1/2. Or 0.5, it's okay to write 0.5. 0.5 what? 0.5 milliliters, ml, right? So report the answer. X is equal to 0.5 ml. Right? So equation, define X, equation, solve, report answer. All right. I hope that's clear, and I hope my expectations about word problems are also clear. And we'll see word problems coming up in future chapters, but right here is a simple introduction.